Welcome back, Sato Hawk here. We are back in the Ring of Elysium murder mystery case of the serial killer. We are up to Chapter 6, titled The Silent Prophet. Since the serial killings began, my suspicions had turned to Gilbert and his cult more than once. While they certainly looked suspicious, our investigations turned up no evidence to indicate that the murderer was among the cultists. Our profile of the killer painted a picture of a pleasure killer who was highly intelligent, blessed with superhuman strength and agility, and extremely skilled in hypnotism and surgery. If he was local, he also had a talent for masking his accent. Were the occult elements of the crime scenes a smokescreen designed to divert our attention to the cult? If my instincts were right, could the blood-filled bathtub in Blue Peak Town be just another smokescreen? But if the theory of the hexagram drawing with the crime scene locations proved true, then the next victim would be in Blue Peak. Was the killer trying to lure us there, or was it an accident? Something he didn't expect. Many intelligent criminals intentionally commit crimes and escape under the police's nose as a show of skill. Was this the case here as well? As I tried to clear up the disorganized threads of thought, I felt a pat on my shoulder. The car had stopped. On a fine day, you can see the Dion Mountains from Blue Peaks Town, a spectacle and wonderful sight to behold. Right now, however, the dark clouds only served to mirror the ominous uncertainty in my heart. The tub was found in a remote hut near the peak. Unsurprisingly, the hut looked like it had been abandoned for a long time. Without any heating, even the interior was freezing cold. The tub was single size, about 1.2 meters long, so old that its original color was practically indistinguishable. It was about 2/3 of the way full with blood, and that had thickened and clotted like one big piece of red paste. The suffocating smell of blood permeated the tiny bathroom. "Sir," Tracy said, "we checked inside and didn't find anything other than blood. No fingerprints anywhere either. The blood lost by the 5 victims added up to 5 pints. Far from enough to fill such a tub unless there were other victims that we didn't know of, and their numbers would have to be terrifying. The possibility was slim. The other explanation was that this was not human blood, but animal blood, just like the blood used to draw the magic circle underneath Vera, the first victim." "What about the searches elsewhere?" "Still going on. Nothing to report now. Records indicate that the hut had been left empty for the past 5 years since the previous owner passed away." "Is the current owner local?" "The previous owner was an old man. His brother was his only family. The brother left Dion for the South many years ago. The current owner of the house is his son, the previous owner's nephew. The nephew has not been in Dion recently. In fact, the family has not been to Dion in the past 5 years." "And the cause of the death of the previous owner?" "Well, because of how remote this location was, he had been dead for days when he was found, lying on his bed with no external injuries. He was 85 years old, and cause of death was presumed to be natural." I remained silent for a while. What was the chance that the family of the old man who lived alone and died of natural causes would come back with murder on their mind? Could they have thought that he was murdered and wanted to exact revenge on society? Did they leave this evidence to overturn the police's conclusion 5 years ago? With so few clues to work with, I gasped at the opportunity of any kind, however inconsequential it might look. I tasked Tracy into looking into the family and left the bathroom to examine the rest of the house. The house had been cleaned after the previous owner's death. Household items had been packed into boxes covered in thick dust. Sir, this looks strange." Joseph crouched down and pointed to a corner with his pen. The wallpaper had come off there, revealing a section of a brick about 5 centimeters wide. Difficult to notice if you were not specifically looking for it. I was about to crouch down myself when Joseph took something out from between the bricks with 2 fingers. "A note, sir." A piece of paper rolled into a cone. The rough edges indicated it was torn out from somewhere. There was only one sentence on the paper: "Night is coming." I had seen this sentence elsewhere. I searched my memory. 30 years ago, Tracy worked in the archives for a year before becoming an investigator. She earned much praise for her organized mind and unfailing memory. She was right. The same sentence was written next to the body of a girl killed in the cultist murder case 30 years ago. The investigation revealed no connection to the cult itself. The perpetrator who killed himself had a history of mental illness, so the case was put down as a typical incident of the murder. Was the murderer a cultist? Or was this yet another smokescreen? I suddenly thought back to the hexagram drawn by linking the crime scenes together and the ruby embedded into the spine of Gilbert's cowhide notebook. "Gilbert," I yelled, making everyone jump. "To Gilbert's house, quick!" I was already late in the night. If my hunch proved true, the tub was meant for Gilbert. There was no time to be discreet. We marched directly toward Gilbert's house. We were too late. Gilbert laid on his couch with dead eyes, covered in a fur blanket. He could have been asleep at first glance, but the edges of his mouth were ripped open from left ear all the way to the right, and sewn with red thread. In the light of the fireplace, the horrifying scene defied all description. Our arrival may have surprised the killer. The holes on Gilbert's neck dropped blood, in contrast to the clean bodies of the previous victims. There were hurried footprints in blood on the ground. By the time I saw them, Tracy and I and Joseph were all after the trail. The sound of broken glass and hectic running roused the crows roosted on the old tree in the front of Gilbert's house, and their caws filled the night. I searched Gilbert's body. The cowhide notebook was nowhere to be found. Hearing the commotion, the people of Blue Peak Town converged on the scene. Nobody cried or shouted. The strangely quiet crowd held their hands together in front of their chest and bowed their heads, murmuring, "He walketh into the snow, and the glorious King shall meeteth in the storm." "Does anyone know what the phrase 'night is coming' means?" I asked one leading the prayer. "The glory of the King shall cleanse the sinners in the darkness of the light," he replied serenely. "The sinners? Who's that?" "Everyone," he replied. "We are all sinners." I had heard enough and changed the topic. "Is there anyone whom you might suspect? A prophet in waiting, a power struggle, personal vengeance? Tell me what you know." "We are all humble servants of the glorious King," an elderly woman replied. "Before him we are all equals." "Any privilege of office? Membership dues?" "The King cares not for coin of man. We do not collect dues. The prophet guides us in confessing our sins and shows the path for the lost flock, the path to the glorious King." Gilbert and I exchanged many scornful remarks over the years, but I had to admit he was a patient man, kind, gentle to those in his everyday life. It was hard to believe that he would have had enemies. The killer took Gilbert's cowhide notebook. Surprise flashed on the faces of all the present. A few elderly townfolk whispered to each other. They must be the elders. The only thing in that notebook was names. What use does the killer have for it? Having concluded their little discussion, one of the elders asked, "Could the killer be after all of us?" "The police will protect you, and our investigation is still ongoing." The elder replied, "We will cooperate, sir. There is no place for betrayal in the service to the glorious King. We will not tolerate having a killer in our midst." I was about to ask further questions when Joseph and Tracy returned, flushed with exertion. I looked at Joseph, seeking an explanation. I didn't see anything, but Tracy said that he looked toward her. She said she saw a shadow that moved quickly toward the cliff and sprouted wings and flew off. "Wings?" I couldn't believe my ears. Tracy had caught her breath and explained. "A collapsed hang glider, maybe. It was dark and he was far away, so you didn't see his face." "No, sir, but I did fire a few shots, just as he was trying to take flight. I'm sure at least one of my shots hit him," Tracy said firmly. She's the defending shooting champion at the department for a reason. "Good girl," I patted her on the shoulder. This was a massive step forward. Finding someone with a gunshot wound would be much easier. I was now convinced that the killer likely came from the outside. The mountains of Dion were closed, conservative place, even though we lived in the foothills of a snowy mountain. Few bothered with tricks like snowboarding that had little practical value in everyday life, let alone hang gliding. But I have seen people fly the skies of the valley. The development of tourist industry has brought athletes, adventurers, thrill seekers, and a highly intelligent and athletic killer. a master hypnotist and hang glider pilot who had investigated the cult of Blue Peak Town. No moon shone on the snowy mountain that night. The night was dark and frigid, the harsh winds blowing snowflakes into our faces like little knife blades. Every night was colder than the one before, and every snowstorm got bigger. The footsteps of Ymir were clearly drawing closer. Tracy, Joseph, and I stumbled in the wind and snow back to our car, like three canoes being tossed up and down in tides. Cleanse the sinner. No. This was worse than that. And that ends the most recent chapter of the Ring of Elysium serial killer murder case. In the first episode, we lost poor Vera, was missing a red pendant. The second one, Teddy, or Theodore, he was an albino. His red eyes had been gouged out. Then we lost Erin in chapter 3. She had painted her thumbnails red, and the killer had decided to chop those off. She was posed in a way to look like a devil-worshipping idol. Her head had been removed and a goat's head replaced. In the fourth, we lost poor Jenny. Her head had been partially scalped where she had had naturally red hair. The organs in her stomach removed and a lamb put in place. Chapter 5, Lucas. He had his heart removed, was dismembered, and the parts were hung from the antlers over by the lake. And in this one, Gilbert. Thank you very much for joining me. I would like to give a shout out tonight to Daggermine and Jambot for giving me a hand tracking down these clues. And there will be a link in the description to go to Jambot's Twitch page. We are on the game most evenings. If you see us, feel free to take a shot at us and take your chances. Again, hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, and we'll catch you on the flip side.